With us this morning is a good friend. He's a pollster, a strategist, a commentator, a best-selling author, and used to be an assistant to President Clinton. His name is Dick Morris. Good morning, Dick. The election of 2018, it's over with. I think we only have one Mississippi still open. Give us your analysis of how you think the things broke out.
Well, I think that the big story here is that the gender gap, the difference between the way men and women vote, opened to incredibly large proportions, very alarming for the Republican Party for the future. In 2014, white women, voted Republican by 14 points. And then in 2016, they voted Republican by 9 points. But this year, it was a dead even tie among white women. And that's very troublesome. And overall, among women, the gender gap was over 30 points, counting Black and Latino women. And the other element of it is that young voters, those under 30, voted overwhelmingly for the Democrats. The gender gap, the gap among those who were under 30, with the margin for the Democrats was over 30 points.
Hey, Dick,
and
why
it had
why
been much smaller in the previous races. Well, I don't know. I think that, obviously the female gender gap, I think, was stirring up the passions over abortion. And I think the appointment of Kavanaugh, while the confirmation hearing helped us win the Senate with the raucous approach of the Democrats, I think that in the House, the fact of the abortion issue being so prominent right before the election really undermined us and made it very hard for us to win. And I'm concerned about that. I'm also concerned that despite the very good economy and despite young people really having opportunities that they've never had before in employment, that they were so strongly opposed to the Republicans, whose policies, after all, made that possible. It's a very troubling situation, and one that we've really got to get to the bottom of relatively quickly.
It's such a big difference between 14, 16, and 18. We broke even. Where is Trump's support coming from?
Well, Trump did very well among the blue-collar voters. That's always been his mainstay, and he continued to do well there. But the white college-educated women who used to be in favor of him really switched in this election. And I think that we were badly hurt by the whole focus on abortion in the period leading up to the election. We have to remember that Roe v. Wade started the whole gender gap. It didn't exist before that. But once that decision came down and the issue polarized, it really caused tremendous difficulty. And I think that this year's election, it really came to the fore. It's interesting because we did well among Latinos, not well, but not worse than we did before, and not worse than we did before among African Americans. The deterioration here was among college-educated, white, young women. And that's the problem the Republicans have now. And we've got to address it, and we've got to aim at it with programs and ideas that are focused on that.
Now, the other big item, Dick, is that Caravan. It is coming closer and closer. Is there going to be a confrontation?
Well, yeah, I think there will be. I think we're going to develop our own kind of, the courts are forcing us to develop our own kind of Gaza Strip here to West Bank. I think that what's going to happen is that these immigrants are going to be stopped at the border, by border patrols and by troops if necessary. And they're not going to be allowed into the country, but we're not going to be allowed to send them home either because of the restrictions placed on us by the courts. And I think the military will erect tents for them, and there'll be kind of a tent city sitting there on the border. I'm not sure whether it'll be on the Mexican side or the American side, but we're going to be developing a very unhealthy situation, physically unhealthy and politically unhealthy. And the courts have absolutely blocked the administration's efforts to have this proceed smoothly. And that's going to lead to all kinds of stories about unhealthy conditions and concerns in the tents. And the courts are putting the administration in a really untenable position here.
I mean, in our country, I always believed in immigration. I'm an immigrant. But it has to be selective immigration, not people that are just going to just stroll in. I mean, the problem happened in the European community with the Muslims just took over all of Europe just about. And that's what caused Brexit.
I think that's not entirely, but that certainly is part of it. The problem is that we're talking here about a phony claim of asylum. These are not people who are showing up and saying, I want to be immigrants. I want to come to the United States because I want to live here. They're claiming they're being persecuted and that they seek political asylum, which is a very narrow category that's defined as people who are being persecuted because of race or religion or political beliefs and have a legitimate fear for their safety or fear of torture if they're returned. And that's nonsense. That's not happening in Guatemala or Honduras. What's going on is that because these areas are fairly lawless, you have significant concerns about crime and obviously about economic opportunity. And that's what's motivating them to come, and that is not the grounds for asylum. So they're trying to fit a piano to a keyhole here. And the administration is saying this is a phony use of the phrase or the concept of asylum. And it certainly
anybody
is.
Over the IQ of 100 realizes that. I mean, this is crazy. Who is supporting these people?
Well, first of all, they don't need a lot of support. They're poor people, but I'll bet that Soros and some of the liberal groups are funding this, particularly because if this succeeds, if these guys are able to get into the U.S. or able to stay here, or heaven forbid, if there's this kind of tent city Gaza Strip building up on our border, they're going to send caravan after caravan after caravan. And they're going to encourage people to bring their babies and their children so they can create a humanitarian disaster, just as Israel faces in dealing with the terrorists on the West Bank. And I think that they're deliberately trying to create a humanitarian crisis that they can then use to force open our borders.
Let's move on to 2020. We got a couple of minutes left. 2020. It's only 2 years away. And on the Democratic side, we hear names like old-time names like Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Al Gore, and then you hear new names. I want to hear the Dick Morris analysis.
Well, I think that the Democratic primary will resolve itself into a series of ethnic and affinity group contests that will then resolve itself into kind of a quarterfinal and a semifinal and then a final when the survivors emerge. In the past, the groupings that lead up to the nomination have been largely geographic. The West, the farm states, the South, the rural states. Then it became ideological, the left against the center against the right. Now I think it's going to be largely ethnic. You're going to have a female primary, in effect, which is going to be Elizabeth Warren against Kamala Harris and possibly with Hillary Clinton. You're going to have a left-wing primary, which will be Bernie Sanders maybe against Beto O'Rourke. You're going to have a black primary, which would be Cory Booker against Eric Holder, against Deval Patrick, against Kamala Harris. And then you'll have an establishment primary of Biden against Hillary. And
So
while
the
figures will all run together, the results will be interpreted as who won from that ethnic group. And then they'll meet in the quarterfinals, semifinals, and the finals.
That is a great analysis. And Dick Morris, you're a great New Yorker. Now, when you went to Stuyvesant High School in New York, were you running Jerry Nadler's campaign, or Jerry Nadler was running yours?
Oh, I was running his. The Republicans are going to have our hands full with Jerry as the Judiciary Committee chairman. He's very methodical. He's a Talmudic scholar, really, and he never lets go.
He's one bright guy, but I think he's wrong on this one.
Yeah. I also just want to mention how outrageous it is what de Blasio is doing with Stuyvesant and with the specialized high schools in New York. I owe everything to Stuyvesant. It was there that I really found myself and flourished. And what he's trying to do is dumb it down by admitting the top 7% of every high school in every junior high in the city into Stuyvesant without a competitive examination.
And I'm a Brooklyn Tech guy, and I agree with you 110%.
It's his idea of make everything equally dumb.
Yeah, yes. Well, Dick Morris, have a great weekend, what's left of it, and we'll catch up with you again real soon.
Thank you, Jim.